Hello, I'm Stephen Childs of virtualvoicelessons.net, and I would like to welcome you to the third part of our lesson series on increasing your high range entitled The Belt Voice. So far, we looked at 2 out of the 3 vocal registers and how they relate in developing our overall high range. The first break or register in the voice is our natural voice, which again is the voice that we use to speak. We saw in previous lessons that the natural voice range can be greatly increased when we simply allow our larynx to float up on high notes, which is, in a sense, allowing larynx to shift into a higher gear, just as a transmission in a car shifts into higher gears to make the car move faster. This is where we see correct breathing come into play, as it is far too difficult to allow the larynx to float if we are strangling ourselves through an improper inhale. I would like also to mention that when we drop back down to lower notes, the larynx must also drop back down. Many times singers will go up to a high note in the correct manner, but when they return to a lower note, they accidentally keep the larynx in a position as if they were still singing high. This is one of the most common reasons for vocal strain. So again, just like a car, when we speed up the transmission, shifts into a higher gear, and when we decrease our speed, the transmission in turn downshifts. And this can become a bit tricky when we perform songs that jump up and down constantly, such as found in many pop songs. The next register that we took a look at was our falsetto voice, or as it's sometimes called, our head voice or soprano voice. We saw that falsetto is often used in contemporary singing as an ornament, contrasting other words or notes. Falsetto is also the means to achieving high soft singing. But as we will now see, if we develop the control over our falsetto, it can be used as the means for high, strong singing as well. So let's take a look at the final register within our voice, which we like to call MEZZO-FALSO, or the belt voice. Now, the term belt voice has gotten a bad rap over the years, especially from the classical voice community, as they are often quick to say that this singing style is damaging to the vocal cords. Often, singers such as Whitney Houston or Mariah Carey are mentioned because they have developed nodules sometimes during their career. Now, I would like to say that to blame the belt voice on this is both misleading and unfortunate. One of the highest causes of nodules is, in fact, overusage of the vocal instrument. Many of these performers sing night after night, going from city to city with constant changing weather conditions and with little to no sleep. Many of them include dancing as part of their act and are expected to rile the crowds up with high energy, motivational type conversations between songs. Some are also involved in movies or in the recording studio at the same time as they are on tour, as Whitney Houston was during the filming of the movie The Bodyguard. These are areas of performance that classical singers never face. And although these diva-type vocalists have developed nodules in their careers, most of them never got them back. If the belting technique were truly the cause of their disorder, then these singers would never recover. To be honest, with the amount of contemporary singers who are belters out there in mainstream music, there should be more of them who have medical issues with their vocal folds if belting were the cause. It's a testament to how natural and undamaging belting actually may be if we think about the amount of belting singers there are out there who never hurt themselves. I myself sing every day with high female singers such as Christina Aguilera and Whitney Houston with my students. I belt higher and with more regularity than any of my students, and yet I have never had a problem with my vocal folds. And I'm saying this not to sound haughty, but it is, in fact, the truth, and an acknowledgement to the one who has blessed us with these abilities. So do not fall prey to the fears that some singers may try and give us when it comes to the belt voice. There are, again, numerous reasons why we develop nodules, including gastroreflux disease, chronic allergies, vocal fatigue, and so on. And just to mention, there are many classical singers that have also developed nodules, including Luciano Pavarotti and Natalie Dessay. So if you do it right, you have nothing to fear. But please do it right. Pay close attention to the correct approach to belting that I will further lay out for you now. If you remember from our previous lessons on the high voice, falsetto is in actuality caused from vibrations along the edges of the vocal cords only. Again, this is why falsetto sounds the way it does, because it's only the very tips of the folds that are generating its characteristically thin sound. The smaller amount of surface vibrations, the smaller the sound. Now, mezzo-falso has a slightly modified approach to achieving its sound. What we do is we press the folds together tightly, sealing them up. And then with a slight increase of subglottal air pressure, the folds are then forced to vibrate fully, just like the natural voice. So we are in the adjustment for falsetto, but the vocal cords are vibrating just like our natural voice, which in turn sounds full and strong. To me, the term mezzo-falso could not be a better name for the technique, because it is truly both falsetto and the natural voice at the same time. Unfortunately, the term belting often signifies being loud, and that is not the approach here. We do not want to yell out a high note. That would be like driving a car 60 miles an hour in first gear. You actually may be able to do this, but your engine would certainly pay the price. How much easier if we just shifted to the next gear instead of just revving the engine higher and higher. The shifting in voice is switching into our third register, mezzo-falso. As mentioned in previous lessons, there are several ways of going about developing your high voice. In order to learn the feel of singing in mezzo-falso, we have to take a few different approaches. One approach is sliding from a low note to a high note. Another is going right up to the note in the form of a burst. And the third approach is morphing from falsetto into mezzo-falso. Now let's start with this third approach, which in and of itself has three parts. Part A, singing in falsetto, because again, falsetto is the overall key for high belting. Part B is this seal up the vocal cords by removing all breathiness. And when we say remove all breathiness, it is literally all of it. We need 100% non-breathy tone when developing mezzo-falso. And finally, part C. We need to increase the amount of air pressure under the vocal folds. And again, this does not mean to yell. We just want to increase the amount of pressure under the folds in order to set them into this higher state of vibration. Again, it is pressure, not volume. Now, just to mention, we will be learning how to belt softly in upcoming lessons, as this is the final stage of developing complete control over the high voice. Belting softly may sound like a contradiction in terms, but it goes to show, once again, that belting does not need to be loud. It just needs to sound like it is. It is an illusion of power. And to achieve this, we must simply increase the amount of air pressure under the folds. And this goes along with our rule. The higher we sing, the more energy is required. So let me demonstrate this for you. As mentioned, there are two other approaches that we must use here at virtualvoicelessons.net in order to develop the feel for belting. And make no mistake about it, it is a feeling that we're trying to establish. Once you achieve the notes that we are shooting for, the next step is to once again take a mental snapshot of the feeling of singing that way. Because one of the main goals that we need to eventually get is putting the larynx in the position for singing high before we sing. Now, we had the same concept before when we studied throat openings. If you remember, we need to open the throat more and more and more the higher we go. But if we suddenly jump up to a note, let's say it's an A above middle C, then we have to open the throat the proper amount for that note before we sing it, not after. If we do it after, there will be a second or two where the vocal tone will be harsh. That is, until we finally get around to opening it. But at that point, it's already too late. Because 1 or 2 seconds is a lifetime to a listener. And that can be the deciding factor on whether or not they will like your voice, especially if it happens on every high note. Now, the same is true for the overall mechanics behind singing high. We do not want to wait until we begin to go for a high note and then allow the larynx to raise. We want to lift it before we actually go for the note. That way, you won't wind up with a strained voice for the first second or two. That is actually time enough to crack. So what will happen through time is that hopefully you will remember the feeling of hitting these certain notes and then putting the larynx in that position first. This is the ultimate goal. Now, one of the approaches I've mentioned for developing mezzo-falso is through sliding. This is where we start on a low note at a comfortable volume and then slide the voice all the way up past the point where it slips into the next laryngeal position and then down again. It will sound like this. When you do the sliding, remember, we do not want to use volume to hit the note. Just slide it up. If you don't get it, try again and again. Now, if you do it gently, you will get it and you will not hurt yourself. Remember, don't force it. Just release it. Now, one other thought on sliding is to be aware that this is a means to an end. And what I mean is, it does not take much for developing sliding as a habit, where every note has to be slid into. That was a very common mistake by many 80s heavy metal singers and can also be heard in underdeveloped pop female singers today. You see, too much of anything is wrong. Sliding is an ornament, and in this application, it's also a tool for developing the feel for slipping into mezzo-falso. But ultimately, we want to be able to hit the note dead on. Now, just to mention, we all slide to some degree no matter what. But sliding can be done so subtly that it appears to the listener as if the note was hit right on, and that is what we want to be able to do. Now, as far as bursting goes, this is also a very important tool for belting. You see, if we ease into these notes, we unintentionally are making high singing much more difficult for ourselves. Listen to singers who are universally considered to be great belters. You will notice that they burst out those high notes each and every time. And remember, what is bursting? It is a sudden increase of air pressure, like a little explosion. Again, if we ease into the note, we will strain. It needs a push to get us over that hill. And remember as well, that bursting is not the same as being loud. It is like little jabs of power, rather than forceful singing the whole length of the phrase. We need to burst the notes, not ease into them. So I do hope you enjoyed today's session on belting. I want to stress to you to take your time and relax. Singing high is more about letting go than anything else. I am Stephen Childs, and I would like to say thank you so much for listening, and God bless.